All right, everybody, welcome back to section 2 of our cybercrime course. And today we're going to be talking about policing and law enforcement and how those interact with cybercrime and the other way around. So, why is the policing or law enforcement job so difficult when it comes to cybercrime? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, some of which we touched on back in the first section. One of which is underreporting. There's a heck of a lot of cybercrimes that happen that never get reported to the police, either because, well, sometimes the victim doesn't even realize they're a victim. Sometimes the victim is embarrassed or ashamed and don't want to tell anybody that they were a victim. Sometimes it makes better business sense to not have it known that a company was a victim. Sometimes there's just the perception that the police can't do anything. There's no reason to report it. So it's a vastly underreported crime, and thus, if police never learn about it, of course they're not going to be able to actually really do much about it. There's also jurisdictional issues, right? It's bad enough when it's the offender and the victim are in two different parts of the same country, but when the offender and victim are in two different countries altogether, that creates even more challenges for law enforcement. There's the public is not really knowledgeable and doesn't really understand well enough how big of a deal cybercrime is, and thus the public puts pressure on the police to investigate, the crimes that it can see a lot easier. So the public wants the police to investigate murders and car thefts and robberies and things like that, and to the point where there's not a lot of public desire for law enforcement to spend more time and energy on cyber crimes, because those are kind of out of the way. People don't, unless they are the direct victim, people don't see them as much, and thus there's not as much of a public desire to have law enforcement spend their time and money on cybercrimes. Cybercrimes are also incredibly difficult to investigate. You have to have a lot of technical knowledge to really understand how to do a good job in any kind of cyber investigation. Everything from network infrastructure to digital forensics to, being able to work with either state or federal agencies. I mean, it's investigating entirely cyber crimes is a much more difficult process than it is with a lot of more traditional crime that police have a lot more experience with. There's a high technology cost, right? The tools that law enforcement needs to perform these investigations often cost a heck of a lot of money. And police departments are reticent to spend any money on anything, especially for things like, digital forensics specific hardware and software in order to investigate that kind of crime. They'd much rather spend it on more officers or, training for kind of, again, the more normal street crimes that the public is so concerned with. Training costs and training time, getting your police trained to do even simple cyber investigations takes time, takes money, takes energy, and takes those police officers away from whatever other job they were doing. And thus, in my humble opinion, I think all officers should have basic digital investigation training, even if it's just, here's how to preserve evidence at a crime scene that is on some kind of digital device. But of course, that's going to require time, require money, require energy that is already in very short supply with a lot of police agencies. And then, of course, there's upper level support. The captains and lieutenants and chiefs and assistant chiefs, all those high ups in a policing organization, and even in the government organizations above the police organization, are usually let's just say, of a generation that doesn't understand technology as well, and thus doesn't want to focus on it as much, doesn't understand the need for the technology costs and the training and the focus on cyber investigations, because, you know, back in their day, they didn't have to use this $10,000 piece of hardware to catch a bank robber. They just, you know, did it the old-fashioned way. Whereas they don't quite understand and don't quite embrace the fact that, you know, the world is a lot different now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And thus, we need new tools. We need training on these areas that weren't necessarily a big deal back when they were patrol officers or lower level, you know, on the ground policing. Now, local law enforcement has both one of the most important jobs in cyber investigations and simultaneously the least important job in cyber investigations. So they're incredibly important because they are the first responders. They're the ones that are going to be usually on the scene, collecting and preserving evidence, arresting the initial perpetrators, taking the initial report from the victims, you know, doing all these aspects that are so incredibly important to any investigation, but especially cyber investigations, because among many other reasons, it's so easy to kind of accidentally destroy digital evidence instead of preserving and protecting it. So local law enforcement has to be kind of ready to do this first responder evidence preservation kind of process. Even if the investigation ends up being taken over by state or federal law enforcement, they still need to be able to do those initial steps and train to do those initial steps. Person-based cybercrimes like revenge porn, things like that, where the offender and victim are in the same jurisdiction, a lot of times local law enforcement can handle. And then, of course, collecting and analyzing digital evidence, both in cybercrimes and in the kind of regular everyday, you know, murders and rapes and robberies and burglaries and all those things. Local law enforcement really needs to know how to utilize digital evidence in all those crimes. Now, state law enforcement, they have a little bit easier of a time with digital investigations, if for no other reason than they have a much larger jurisdiction, right? So even if the offender and victim are in two different local police agency jurisdictions, they might still be in the same state police agency jurisdiction, and thus it can be a lot easier for them to investigate and process these cyber crimes. They usually have a lot more lab support, i.e., better, you know, units within the state law enforcement agency that are specifically trained to do digital forensics analysis, or specifically trained and equipped to look into network infrastructure to try to trace the offender's location. But they have these labs and specialized units that they can utilize and have been specially trained in cyber investigations and cyber crimes and how to deal with them and how to work on them, because they have usually more people, more budget, more ability to develop these special labs and special units. They also have the opportunity to have fusion centers, i.e., we're going to take intelligence from these local agencies within our jurisdiction and bring it all together into this one central location. So they can have kind of participation from lots of lower level agencies, all kind of brought together under this state law enforcement agency umbrella. And this is really useful with cybercrimes. This kind of intelligence sharing and working together and bringing together pieces from disparate agencies and disparate parts of the government and different parts of law enforcement, and putting them all together into one central location can be incredibly valuable when it comes to both cyber investigations and regular investigations that have some kind of cyber component. Now, federal law enforcement, obviously they have the largest jurisdiction. It's still not worldwide, but it's, countrywide. And that's, again, very important from can you have one law enforcement agency with victim and offender and scene of the crime all under that one umbrella, because that makes things so much easier. And it's also, of course, federal law enforcement that's going to be kind of the primary investigative law enforcement arm in any kind of international investigation. So when there is some kind of international incident and somebody from, say, Canada breaks into a computer here in the United States, it's going to be federal law enforcement that spearheads that investigation, works with the Canadian police in order to find the offender, and then kind of keeps track of that investigative process that crosses national borders. Now, here in the United States, of course, we have lots and lots of different federal policing agencies over lots of different parts of the government, and each one, or I should say most of them, have some kind of cyber investigation capability, some kind of cyber investigation mission. And there's a lot of overlap, even if some agencies kind of focus on some areas of cybercrime and other agencies focus on other areas of cybercrime. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, obviously they have a very broad mission. They're about as broad of a law enforcement agency of all kinds agency that we have at the federal level. Their focus is everything from terrorism to child porn to international hacking and national intelligence kind of situations. So they do a lot of different cyber investigations or regular investigations with some kind of cyber component. The Secret Service, contrary to popular belief, the main goal, the main mission of the Secret Service is not to protect the president. That is a fairly small, a relatively small part of what they do. Their main goal is to look into financial crimes. They're the head kind of law enforcement agency for the Treasury Department. So they investigate things like counterfeiting and financial fraud and things like that. And of course, those are going to have all kinds of cyber pieces to it, and there are going to be a lot of cyber investigations within that field of financial crime. Now, Customs and Border Protection and then Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they have a cyber component to their mission as well. I actually was discussing this a few years ago with a CBP officer, and he was talking about how they have a big cyber component, especially when it comes to preventing things like child porn and other kind of illegal digital information from entering the country just by people bringing in laptops and hard drives and thumb drives and stuff as they're coming into the country. So whenever these groups are, whenever any person is entering the country and they're bringing with them a laptop or a thumb drive or something, it is the job of these agencies to kind of make sure that they're not bringing in illegal hacking programs or illegal pornography or anything like that. The PIS, the Postal Investigation Service, this is the main law enforcement branch of the postal system. And very similar to ICE and CBP, they have to be on the lookout for people sending physical media with illegal information. But then they're also involved in cyber investigations. Say if I go on the dark web and order a kilo of cocaine, that cocaine is going to have to get to me somehow, right? And so the U.S. postal system is one of the common ways that it will go. The offender, both sender and receiver of that illegal drug are kind of relying on it to slip by the postal system and the postal inspectors, and the postal service will just deliver it without asking too many questions about what's inside it. And if they do find that cocaine and they want to know who ordered it and who sent it, there's going to be a cyber component there because it was ordered by me using that dark web system with anonymous or near anonymous communications. The Department of Defense has their own cyber command. Their responsibility is kind of where cybercrime and military / national intelligence aspects overlap. So anytime a U.S. military computer is attacked, which is fairly often that military computers at least get attempted break-ins, but it's their job to kind of utilize cyber resources both in defense of our military and offensively against enemy militaries in the case of war. And so they have to not only know how to protect us, they need to know kind of how to attack. They kind of need to know how to be the criminals, if you will, when it comes to, if we do have a war, say tomorrow with Canada. I know the Canadians have been jealous of our country for a long time, and so if they invade Maine and Montana tomorrow, the U.S. military is going to have to know how to attack the Canadian military's services and hardware and intelligence and communications. And so they kind of both have to be the protectors and the attackers, or the equivalent of being a cyber criminal. And then, of course, there's the NSA, the National Security Agency. They have a huge anti-terrorism mission, among other things. But it's their job, again, to both protect the United States and attack other countries from an intelligence gathering, classified information, military capabilities kind of way, right? And there's lots of different ways they can do that. Now, that's going to be it for the first half of this section. I'll be back for the second half in just a moment.